So today I have another awesome opportunity to link up with the big man with literally an even bigger heart. Luke, welcome to Potential is Human, and thank you for agreeing to be in conversation with me today. How are
It's
you?
absolutely, thanks, Ryan. It's absolutely awesome to be here, my man. And just being able to be on this call with you and for us to open up our hearts to each other is really what I stand for today. So I'm really grateful that the flow of life has brought me here once again. And I look forward to a deep, passionate conversation.
Yeah, if you opened up your heart to me, right, it may literally swallow me. It's so big. So thank you for like the immensity of love that I've got to see you pouring out into the world. And we're going to get to how this all started taking shape for you. But let's rewind
Yeah.
to our younger days. I only found out fairly recently that we are both Maritzburg College boys. So for those who are watching and don't know what Maritzburg College is, it's a top boys high school in South Africa. And I'm slightly younger than Luke, but Luke, a fellow Maritzburg College old boy as well. Luke, my question to you around school was, how did you find that
Yeah.
journey, those 4 or 5 very formative years in high school as a man?
Well, I must admit, Ryan, it was an easy decision to go to a school like that because, my brother and I were both sportsmen, and we had grown up in a family where our folks wanted the best for us and they wanted to send us to the best schools. So it was a natural progression for us to go to Maritzburg College. The sport spoke for itself. It wasn't really about the academics for us at the time. And it was just I enjoyed my time at Maritzburg College. I was always wasn't quite in the in crowd or the cool crowd, but I always kind of did my level best there and achieved quite well in both in academics and in sport. And I mean, looking back now, I would probably say that my high school career was a happy time. It was probably one of the happiest times in my life that I can recall. I enjoyed my time there. I made some lifelong friends over there that I still speak to today. And yeah, in general, it was a very happy time for me. And I would say that it conditioned me into a lot of the good disciplines that I've kept going in my life today.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it was very good. But then also from another perspective, I was conditioned to have certain beliefs that I now realize don't serve me any longer. And that's kind of what the schooling system in general, not Maritzburg College per se, has done. And I'm seeing the same thing being repeated with my own son, who is at a very similar school to Maritzburg College, in that he's at Wynberg Boys High School, where he's getting all the wonderful disciplines and conditioning that he's following through today in his life. But also, I just trust and hope that he is going to be following his dreams and not kind of following what society and deems to be what success actually is.
I love that you
So
can
yeah,
uphold our school's name so positively. So thank you. You're an example from that
yeah,
aspect. But then also more so the fact that you understand what your own son is going through, right? And you can just be there as the guide or the inspiration for him to also make his own choices at this very important time in his journey.
yeah. I'll give you a very good example. Actually, my son is currently going through a process where two of his friends have decided that they wanted to leave the school. And I actually had a conversation with him this past weekend, and I was just inquiring because his mother mentioned to me that at one point he was also quite unhappy at the school, and I just started to go into some questioning with him as to where he sits with all of this, and it was interesting to note his answers, because most of what he was telling me was through peer pressure, number one, and secondly, it was to do with how he felt he was how he was being handled by the schooling system, not by teachers per se, not a discipline issue per se, but just how he felt held by the actual process or not held by the process. And I think through the process that I've gone through in my life, and certainly the process that his mother's also currently going through in his life, he's a lot more aware of
Mm,
himself and what's happening
mm.
around him. So from that point of view, I'm very, very happy, that even at his young age of 17, he is starting to question the system, so to speak.
Yeah. And maybe there's parents who will
So
listen to
yeah,
this as well. So while we're on this topic, how do you go about something like that? I won't know. I'm not yet a parent myself. But when you see
mm,
that your son has a level of awareness that perhaps is allowing him to start questioning the system and perhaps even want to start exploring things that the system doesn't necessarily offer, what is that like?
yeah,
Because for a less conscious being, there can be a lot of reactivity in a parent which wants their child to do a thing a certain way or doesn't think that their child yet knows how to make their own decisions at 17, which may absolutely not be the case.
yeah.
These days, a 17-year-old can make brilliant decisions.
Absolutely. And the greatest misconception as a parent that I made up to a very recent point in my life was that
Mm,
I wanted my son to follow the system. I wanted him to go to school,
yeah.
go to university, get a good job. And I realized that that system is deeply flawed from my own experience. I can only
Mm-hmm.
I can only speak from my own experience. And I've realized that certainly as a parent, the greatest thing that I can do for my son is to support him in whatever decision he decides to take in his life, provided he's doing what makes his heart happy.
Yeah.
And that's constantly what I'm telling him, just do what makes your heart happy. It's not about doing your math, science, economics, English. Study what makes you happy, because ultimately that's best going to serve your heart. And that is the message that I keep putting to him when I spend time with him, is to just keep doing what makes you happy and what makes your soul smile, really.
Mm. I couldn't have
And
said
that's
it
what it's
better.
about for him.
Mm.
Yeah.
And to like parents to allow for
Because
that, right? To allow for your child to do what makes their heart happy, not yours. Yes, there's a
exactly, and
responsibility,
these,
right? You're a
yeah,
parent. You want the best for them. You're invested in the upbringing of this beautiful being, but at some point it's not about you.
yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And I think if I hadn't been on the process that I've been on, because I was always one of those rah, 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 pro the system,
Mm,
until I hit rock bottom in my own life. And I realize now that the best support that I can offer this kid, my son and my daughter, because I have a little daughter as well who's 10 years old, is really to just make them as aware of themselves and as conscious as they possibly can be, and through that supporting them in making their own decisions and not making the decisions for them.
mm.
And I think that's probably the greatest gift and legacy that I could leave behind for them, is to support them in their decision making rather than either doing it for them or forcing them into actually doing something that their heart is not aligned to.
Yeah, well done. And I see the way you're invested in their lives through what you share. You allow others to see in terms of allowing them to make their own decisions. And one day, Luke, when it's my turn, I'll definitely be taking a few pages out of your book. And I look forward to those discussions and also
Yeah.
hearing where it went wrong. But what I want to also know
Yeah.
from
Well,
you,
yeah. Mm,
yeah,
mm.
go for it. You have something to say there.
Sorry, but no. What I also wanted to say, Ryan, was that it hasn't always been this way.
Mm,
I wasn't myself a very present father in their lives for a great number of years, and I've been separated from their mother for the past 3.5 years through no fault of my own, which
mm,
brought me into the process that I'm currently involved in. And it's only through having gone through these hardships and having walked this path that I've walked that I've come to the realization that I can only relate to these kids as much as what I'm relating to myself, and I can only pull that love to them, to the love to which I have myself. And for a large time and part in my life, I had zero love for myself. I had zero time for myself. which resulted in me having very little love. And I can say that now as a parent, and very little time for them, you know. It's very easy to say you love somebody, but to truly feel that love that resonates within yourself, that's what it really is all about for me.
Let's go straight there. Because for somebody to hear that there was a time where you had zero love for yourself, when was this?
Yeah.
What did this look like? And where did Luke find himself?
Well, I think, you know, Ryan, if I take it right back to my formative years when I was a child, I was always an overweight child throughout my life. Right from as way back as I can remember, I can always remember my mother and father being on diet and putting me on diet as a child, because I was an overweight child. And, you know, I was always made to believe that through various people at school and through my own belief on how I was brought up within the family home, that, you know, being overweight wasn't a good thing. And, you know, it got so bad with my weight that it became such a problem that I wouldn't even want to do PE at school because I was too afraid to take my shirt off. And it was even in those early years where I'd already started developing defense mechanisms with regards to my body. And I carried that body dysmorphia with me throughout my life. And it's only been recently where I've really embraced the freedom and flow of who I truly am, where I've really been able to get to grips with that. So I'd say in my early years, you know, weight was always a problem, and it really affected my confidence. It affected how I related to the opposite sex, even moving into my high school career, where I started to become better at sport because I was much bigger than everybody else, and I discovered the gym. And I remember in my early years of high school, I started to play in the top rugby sides, which, as you know, at Maritzburg College is kind of the be all and end all, you know, or so we were led to think at that stage of our lives. And, you know, having done that, it really created this false confidence that existed within me. And I started playing into, even already at the age of 13, 14, 15, this kind of ego that allowed me to be something that I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It took me away from the authentic person that I truly was, because I've always been a very soft-hearted, kind, loving individual. And I'd say as early as I can remember, when I was in grade 7, I started wanting to fit in with the in crowd, and therefore moving away from being authentic, which then led me into my high school years, which got me involved in the sport, which then played into that ego. And eventually what happened was I then got to matric, and I injured myself and I couldn't play sport anymore. So I looked for the next best thing to bolster that false confidence and this inauthenticity, which I thought everybody wanted from me and that people liked. Because ultimately, I knew even at that age, if I look back, that I didn't like myself very much. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like the way I spoke. I didn't like that I wasn't clever enough. There was a lot going on in that young mind, you know. And it then led me into mixing probably with, I would say, the wrong people. And I eventually got into alcohol. And, you know, like that age-old story, alcohol was the gateway towards marijuana. Marijuana was the gateway towards ecstasy. Ecstasy was the gateway towards cocaine. And by the time I was in second year varsity, I was a full-blown cocaine user, you know, and I would mask it on the premise that, you know, I was young and I was having fun. And I registered for all these weird and wonderful courses at university, plugged them all, when meanwhile, you know, I was just playing into this inauthentic thug that I thought everybody wanted to love, you know. And that followed me right up until about 3 years ago, you know. And, you know, if I look back on it now, you know, it makes me quite emotional to think about how unhappy I was in my life, from, I'd say, after matric up until 3 years ago. And it was really just a life which was being fueled by inauthentic behavior, being somebody who I wasn't, really living from hand to mouth in terms of not giving a damn where things came from. I was living a very entitled life. I believed that my parents owed me something in life, because I deemed that I had like quite a at the time I was trying to look for everybody else but myself to blame for my behaviors, and it resulted in me in landing up plugging the university dismally. I ended up working at our family business, and I got so heavily into drugs then, mixing in the underworld and wrong crowd of Cape Town. And by the age of, I think, 28, I had stolen a large sum of money from our family business to try and keep up with this lifestyle. And my parents did what any loving parent would do, I believe, and they sent me to my first rehab. And sure, dude, it was just a chaotic time of my life. I went into my first rehab facility, and I'm an extremely good manipulator and an extremely good pretender, and I managed to kind of dot all the I's and cross all the T's in rehab. And I ended up walking out of rehab, with this wonderful resume of one-lining quotes which could get me out of any sticky situation, not only with my family who loved me dearly, but with friends as well who loved me dearly and were worried about me. So I managed to stay clean for probably about 6 months. And from the age of 28 until the age of, I'd say, 37, I was in and out of rehab 5 times. I had blown 2 businesses down the toilet, and had numerous incidents in my life which involved violence, which involved being unfaithful towards my wife, and geez, it was just absolutely pandemonious and chaotic.
So I'm hearing all of this, and I'm touched because this is new information to me, right? You and I have not shared this part of our journeys together. So the vulnerability and the radical honesty on a podcast, thank you. To know that you went on this journey of like chaos and dancing in the darkness, because what it ultimately was some desperate cry for happiness and love. And the more you try to seek this outside of yourself, I guess the more we see that it's fleeting, it's temporary, and we're not going to find it there. But something has rapidly shifted for you. Where did the shift start to happen? And then where did you start seeing that I can no longer do it this way? Because somebody who's listening is probably like, this guy was like off the wall. But today, you're able to own it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's taken me, Ryan, it took me a very long time before I finally got the help from being in this chaotic situation and not knowing where I was going or what to do. It got to the point where I had just been kicked out of my 5th rehab here in Cape Town, and I had just succumbed to the fact that this was how life was always going to be for me. I was a master manipulator, like I said. I could talk the talk, I could walk the walk, I could get myself into all the right circles because of the way I could speak. I had a very fast tongue, and I was basically a fraud and a con man, if I'm honest. And I was at dire straits, and after my wife had caught me being unfaithful for about the 10th time, I realized that something had to change in my life, because I was going to die. And what led me to this was that I found myself at a hotel, at a 5-star hotel in Cape Town,
Mm.
lying on the floor, realizing that was about to overdose on cocaine, because 2 weeks prior to that, I had witnessed a friend of mine overdosing on cocaine. And I was lying on the floor of this hotel room, shaking uncontrollably, I suppose about to die. And something, and I was in and out of consciousness whilst going through this unbelievable, I suppose it can only be described as serotonin overdose. I had overstimulated my body with cocaine and sleeping tablets. And I remember having this moment where I just closed my eyes, and I believed that I was passing over and onto the other side. And I remember having this deep conversation with God, saying, if you afford me this opportunity to get out of this mess, then I will always not only serve you, but want to go out and do work for you.
Mm.
And it was in that moment that I suddenly opened my eyes, and I screamed at the top of my lungs for help. And thank God somebody heard me. And I then had to crawl to the hotel room door to try, because I'd latched the door so tightly from the paranoia that I had, because I spend most of the time looking through peepholes. And I'm sure any recovering cocaine addict can relate to that, because it's the paranoia that really gets you in the end. And I managed to open this door somehow with uncontrollable shaking and not knowing what was going on or what was going to become of me. And in that moment, I just surrendered and allowed the paramedics to do what they needed to do. And I woke up 2 days later in a government hospital. And whew, even talking about it now, I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach, because it was just so chaotic. And yeah, man, I woke up and I realized things needed to change in my life. And it took me two tries after that before I actually got it right. And on my final relapse that I had, I went to visit my children, because at this stage, my wife didn't want me around the house or to see the kids, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And she suggested that I go and see a very dear friend, of hers who was a counselor. And I decided that I would just give it a try, not giving it much hope. And I went to this lady, and she was she's my best friend, one of my best friends today, by the way. And I remember walking into her office, and she's this very petite little Muslim lady, and I was this like big guy with a bald head and tattoos. And I walked into the office, and I was like, this is not going to work for me. But I thought, I'm going to go with it anyways. And within 5 minutes of speaking to this lady,
Mm.
she kind of summed me up completely. And she made mention to me that, she holds plant medicine ceremonies, and she felt that, I had nothing to lose in my life other than to give this a shot. And, for me at the time, when somebody mentioned plant medicine, I didn't know what plant medicine was at the time. I thought, I deemed magic mushrooms and things like that all to be just plain drugs. I didn't realize the healing effects that they had.
Sure.
And sure, I agreed to do the ceremony, but part of doing the ceremony meant that I would have to stay clean of drugs for at least 4 days, which at the time was a huge commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so worn out from having not slept for days on end that I ended up just sleeping for most of that time. And I landed up about 2 weeks later, staying clean for 4 days and going for this plant medicine ceremony. And it really felt like it was life changing. It absolutely, positively had an amazing impact on my life. And from that moment on, something energetically shifted in my life, and I realized that I got this wave of joy and happiness which entered into my heart, which I'd never felt before.
Mm.
And I carried that with me for a number of weeks after that plant medicine ceremony. And I then became despondent again because I didn't realize that, one needs to integrate the knowledge and the wisdom that is derived from the plants. And I ended up relapsing once again on Coke and going down that rabbit hole again for about 7 days. And I then came out of that and went back to see Yasmin, who then I managed to then get myself straight again. And it then led me to going on another plant medicine ceremony, but this time it was far more intense, and that was ayahuasca. And I went on my very first ayahuasca ceremony with a very well-known community here in Cape Town, and that really was the transformation that absolutely changed my life. It took me to all of the traumas in my life which I refused to go to, and it dropped me right in the middle of them. And for that entire evening and process, I was in the worst amount of pain. It had taken me to the worst places in my life that, like I said, that I refused to go to. And eventually what happened was, they call ayahuasca Madre Ayahuasca, which is grandmother ayahuasca. And she took me through like a mother and a grandmother. She took me through this intense journey of seeing aspects of my life that I didn't want to go to and feeling feelings that I'd never felt before. But then at the end of the ceremony, she gently brought me through. And it was in that moment when I started to realize that things needed to be done differently than in the first plant medicine ceremony. And that's when I really got stuck in to doing, at the time, copious amounts of plant medicine, which kept me off cocaine for, up until now. And I haven't really looked back since. And it's been quite a process, and it's been very painful in the same time, but also it's been one of the happiest times in my life.
Someone who hears that is probably like, how has this been one of the happiest times in his life, right? But we lose ourselves to find ourselves again. And throughout this whole process, Luke's just been wanting to come back to the truth of who he really is, right? That center, that heart space. And someone who might also have been on a journey with drugs and is trying their best to come out of it and is now hearing plant medicine. And we've seen the rise of plant medicine in modern day society and the healing that plants are offering. Is there anything that you would offer to somebody who's maybe thinking like, shit, I might need to go this route and it could help me as well? Because it's also something that needs a lot of reverence and a lot of respect. It's not like, let me just go on this wild plant journey, pursuit of trying to find something.
Absolutely, Ryan. And, firstly, I'll say right off the bat, plant medicine is not for everybody. But it certainly worked for me, and I can only speak from my own experience of it. And, for me, what plant medicine has done is I always liken it to when you're young and you get your first job and you've got enough money to go and buy a car. And you go and buy a car and you walk past the BMW garage and you see a brand new BMW and you say, one day when I've got enough money and I work hard enough, I can own that car. But for now, I've got to live within my means and drive this car. And that's no different to what plant medicine does, and what I've had to learn the hard way with it is that what plant medicine does is it shows you what's always existed within yourself. It shows you and it takes you back to your true core essence. And what it showed me in my journey was who I really was. However, in order for me to get there, I was going to have to put in the work. and that for me has been possibly one of the hardest things to grasp. And I've only really got on top of it, I would say, in the last 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Because what happened with me with plant medicine was
Yeah.
that, yes, I got into plant medicine, and yes, it kept me off cocaine, and yes, it took me to all those aspects of my life that I didn't want to go to. But eventually what started to happen was that, much like I was running away in my, I'd call it, in my normal kind of matrix life, where it was fueled by sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and running away from myself and living an inauthentic life. But what was happening to me within the plant medicine was that I became addicted to, the love and light. It was all about like going to these ceremonies, listening to the beautiful music, and taking these wonderful plants. And by the end of the ceremony, everybody would be like, I love you, my brother. We're here for each other. But then guess what? 3 days later, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, life goes back to normal, unless you start putting in the work and integrating what you've got from the ceremony. And that for me has possibly been the greatest breakthrough for me in my life, is to realize how important it is to get back to my human self and have a human experience. I realize that, yes, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but we also need to be human. And, it's like we said on the meditation the other day, what is the point of having this beautiful trophy of self? And on the one side, we've got the spiritual side, and on the other side, we've got the human side. And we spit shining this trophy. We reading the books, we're doing the plant medicine, we are attending all these self-help courses, we meditating. What's the point if we're not integrating it into our everyday lives? What's the point if we're not becoming real with it? What's the point if we're not willing to sit in that uncomfortability and feel those feelings and listen to that ancient wisdom that ultimately comes from within?
I'm so
And
glad you have expressed what you've just expressed, right? Because the draw to plant medicine can be so strong, and if it's calling you, then it's calling you, right? I'm not here to tell you what to do, and neither is Luke saying do it or don't. You have to have that ability to go within and choose for yourself. But many people might not know that it's essentially, Luke, the plants that brought us together, right? Through our own journeys,
absolutely,
you and I got to connect, and it's overwhelmingly beautiful what I experienced through my own use of plant medicine and trying to understand more of who Ryan really is. But what you've said about like coming back to being human, I can say like at least the first 5 times, right? It was like I experienced something in ceremony after ingesting mushrooms that reminds you of exactly who you are. There's this deep knowing. And then, yes, we come out of the ceremony and there's so much love being shared amongst the people who are in the space. And there's just like so much to go and integrate. But that's where the real work is in the integration, as you've said. And then Ryan would go back into real
yeah,
life. And then it would start feeling like frustrating again. I would like not be happy in myself. And I knew that I could go and do the plant medicine again. There was a desperate wanting until the last time where I eventually saw that you are it. You are it.
amen,
You
brother.
you were always it. You forgot, and I've helped show you the way. But what goes up must come down. And in these ceremonies, the bliss you experience and sometimes the very deep challenges you experience, you still have to stand up on your
Yeah,
own 2 human feet at some point and go out and be in the world, and not just in the ceremony
absolutely,
space,
Ryan.
being with the plants. And that's where I believe that our light truly shines is like, can I go out and now be a human with the deeper knowing that I am this spiritual being having a human experience, but how well can I be the human version of myself?
Absolutely, Ryan. And it just plays in beautifully is that plant medicine gives you an opportunity to really live your true purpose. And and when I say plant medicine, I mean yourself. It's showing you what's always existed within yourself. We don't actually need the plants, but some of us just need a little bit of a push in life, and I was one of those people. I needed a big push from a lot of plants that
Sounds like you had
eventually
a
got me to
massive whack, not a little push.
I did, brother, I did. And I realize now how how ultimately it served me in getting to where I am now. But I would
Sure.
say that 70% of the plants that I did were giving me the same messages.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just became addicted to like the love and light and the feeling of the bliss and the joy, and the beautiful music that I was hearing. But ultimately today I can sit in this chair and I can say to you that the integration is where it has to start and end, because ultimately there is no point in doing it if we are not going to integrate it into our lives. And for me, that is what I feel most passionate about today, and what has led me into ultimately putting the plants aside now and saying, thank you, you have served me up to this point, and the various facilitators and the teachers and the guides that have taken me, I honor them from my heart. And I thank them for having brought me this far. But now it's time for me to take the baton and to integrate all of that knowledge and to honor them by honoring myself first and foremost, and living my true purpose and going through the human experience of what life truly is, as according to Luke Musgrave, and where I fit into this greater universe.
I see you so much. I'm with you. I back you 100%. I'm so grateful that you are where you are. And like you've said, like the massive gratitude and thanks to every single step of our
Yeah,
individual journeys, right? With the plants, with the people who hold that space. We know who they are, their beauty, the immensity of what they take on to support the likes of Luke and Ryan when we think we're at rock bottom and bombing out. But as you've perfectly said, it's like you can end up chasing yourself in a circle if you don't eventually step out and see that you are it. And now you can go and, as you say, integrate, deepen that transformation, try it out there in the
yeah,
world, bump your head again, and keep coming back to the truth of yourself on this journey without denying any parts of what life actually has to offer you. Because I think that's the first thing people do so quickly is like, when I go on this journey of transformation and I start discovering, call it a spirituality, suddenly the human element of what it means to be alive is like something that comes second. But you can't do life if it's not for Ryan and it's not for Luke exactly as you are.
absolutely. I so agree with what you're saying, Ryan. And for me, it really is, like I keep saying, it's about just integrating everything that I know. And I find myself going back to ceremonies that I've done 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 11 months ago, and suddenly I'll be sitting in meditation and I'll be like, yes, that's what that means.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part about my life today is that every day is a process, and no experience is not a teaching and a learning. Because what I'm ultimately able to do now is I can remove myself from Luke and I can witness what's happening in my life. It's like that beautiful quote from Ramdas where he says, when you are, I don't know the exact words, but it's when you become a witness to your life as opposed to an actor in it. That's when
Yes.
that's when you will start to achieve greatness and happiness and step into your power. And that has been so true. It's about having gone on this hero's journey of life and having the courage and realizing that the healing process cannot be rushed. It requires patience. It requires being able to sit with feelings and emotions which at times are not the most comfortable, and allowing yourself to go through it, and allowing them to come and go, and realizing that you are so much more than those feelings and emotions and that thinking that you have, and staying in a constant state of joy despite it.
Yeah, which might sound so
And that's what
foreign
it
and
really,
hard, right? But I guess that's why we're here, to show people that it's possible, right? Can we observe
until
and be
you give
aware?
your, yeah, until you give yourself a break,
Yeah,
until you say to yourself, right, I'm going to give myself a break and I'm going to sit with whatever's happening in my life and I'm going to just be. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be having a rough day. It's okay to be sitting in uncomfortability. It's okay to cry. I mean, I have never cried so much in my life as I have in the past 6 months. I've had moments where I've been lying on my bedroom floor, curled up in a ball, just sobbing my eyes out. But it's in those moments where I truly get to experience what grace truly is, and not only experience what grace truly is, but it allows me to step that much closer to liberating myself and ultimately opening my heart and purifying it every single time.
yeah. And as you've so openly been sharing, right, and in our discussions, and you've now chatted about like the tears, I get moved when I hear you speak about the tears, not because it's weakness, because we're conditioned to believe like big boys don't cry and all that bullshit that happens in this world, right? But like the wisdom and the grace that exists when we feel and allow for those emotions to be truly felt, to the degree that sometimes it overwhelms us, right? Like, hold
Yeah,
all of what the experience is offering you. I can only say in my experience that sometimes it's actually in those moments that the wisdom arrives. But when I try and avoid that
yeah,
weakness, or when I don't want to show vulnerability, I'm just actually playing fool to myself. It's when we just
yeah.
allow for the fullness of that experience. As you've said, there's grace in that. Something gets given to us that this too shall pass. And when it does, you see and understand exactly why those tears needed to flow from the deepest place within you.
Oh, absolutely, Ryan. And it's like anything. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more you start liberating yourself, the more you want to liberate yourself more and more and more, and really get to that authentic self. Sitting in this chair today, I can say I've had an uncomfortable weekend, but I'm still showing up for life. I'm still sitting in this chair, pouring my heart out to you, and sitting here speaking so openly and honestly about my process and ultimately what I've gone through and where it's brought me to is just purifying my heart even more, because it reminds me of the man that I am sitting in this chair today, which is absolute love and absolute awareness. And I know that the deeper I'm willing to go within myself is the deeper to which happiness will flow in my life today. And joy will then override the happiness, because joy is a constant state. Happiness can be a fleeting moment. And it's all about living a joyful life where I can just spread as much love to other people, and most importantly, encourage other people. There have been so many times in my life when I wasn't encouraged, and which led me to feel that I wasn't good enough. So my purpose in life now is to encourage as many people as I can to follow their true path and potential. And that's why I love human beings like yourself who stand for other people to step into their true potential. It's like the title of your book, Potential is Human. And why shouldn't we all achieve? Why shouldn't we all achieve to our greatest potential? Because the only people that are stopping us from doing that is ourselves.
Yes. I almost want to close this off there because that was perfect. I do want to ask you though, the love that you are now able to gift to this world and share with this world outwardly, I'm confident in saying it is to the degree of the level of love that you had to discover in yourself first, right?
Yeah,
Because it wasn't there.
absolutely
Like you
right.
said earlier in the podcast, Luke was at a point where there was zero love for himself, and that cup was empty. And
Yeah.
then you went on the journey of filling it up, and now I see you pouring yourself into the world. I acknowledge you for the way you're sharing
Well,
your heart, but you went and found it first.
absolutely. And what a fact-finding mission it has been. And the greatest realization that I've come to is that I can only love another human being to the degree with which I love myself. It's like I said with regards to my son earlier on in the podcast. And the self-love has really come from practicing gratitude, meditating, being in process, allowing myself to feel, and ultimately saying it's okay to just be. And it's okay to just be Luke, because Luke is here, he's present, and he has a lot to offer this world today, which has really led me into my next phase of life where I'm studying. I'm studying to be a life coach as well. I've got my own little community which is going now as well. I'm part of the same community which you also belong to, Smiling Soul, which is really the next phase of life for me, and the more love that I can pour out to that, the better, and the more people that I can inspire through inspiring myself first and foremost. That's what it's all about for me, Ryan.
I don't question it for a second. I think you're an incredible individual. Your journey has been exactly how it must be for you to support so many others on their journey of transformation and keep standing up to do it every single day. The human in me sees the human in you, while the divine in me also sees the divine in you. And I'm feeling it only right today, and it's only landing now. Perhaps you and I can just actually dedicate this podcast right now to every single person who has been on our journey and has played a role in getting us here. They know who they are. The love I have for them, I couldn't wrap my arms around all of them at the same time, right? There's like angels on our path. You mentioned the counselor. We know the people in the plant medicine communities. I've had coaches. We have other people. We have each other, right? You and I. For me, I just want to dedicate this to those beautiful beings who are choosing to be seen in this world and do their work, and allow the likes of Brother Luke and Ryan to show up.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, Ryan, I'd like to dedicate a little 1-minute song to all those souls out there who are searching and who perhaps just need that little step of encouragement that we had to take as well. And it goes a little something like this. I'm sitting here full of adoration for you, for how great you truly are, how great you truly are. For you alone are the most high, and I just want to say how great you truly are. And I dedicate that not only to you, my brother, but to every single individual who is on this path, and to all those who will be on this path. My heart is so open to you, and I love each and every one of you, even those that I don't know, because I know somewhere along the line our paths and our lives and our hearts will cross if it so wills. And I wish everybody just so much love and joy on their paths. And thank you to you, Ryan, it's such an honor to walk this path with you too, my brother. And, I remember when you said to me not too long ago, you said when I was going to join the Smiling Soul coaching group, you said to me, you think that there's going to be some great things happening, my brother, and there's already huge things happening in my life. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity as well.
It's the greatest pleasure. You remind me time and time again of why waking up is such a blessing and such a valuable process in our lives, right? And I see everything you're doing. I can't wait to see what else you do. And thank you for just so openly sharing today on this podcast. I had no idea where this was going to go. And I'm truly in gratitude for the immensity of what has been shared today. And keep going. I'm with you every step of the way.